Ariba woke up that morning with a soft smile on her face, one hand instinctively resting on her swollen belly. The early sunlight filtered through the cream-colored curtains of her modest bedroom, casting a warm glow that made everything feel softer, more hopeful. It was her birthday, her first while pregnant, and though the last few months hadn't been easy, she believed, deep in her heart, that this day would bring some joy. Maybe Danish, her husband, would remember the way he used to surprise her before things got cold. Maybe his mother and father would finally warm up to her and the life she was about to bring into the world. She had even baked her own cake the night before, a simple chocolate sponge with whipped cream, decorated with pink and white icing. It now sat carefully boxed in the fridge, waiting to be shared. After getting dressed, a loose, soft blue camise that gently draped over her round belly, she made her way downstairs, expecting at least a smile, a kind word, a happy birthday. But the house was quiet. The silence settled uncomfortably around her like thick fog. Danish sat on the sofa, scrolling on his phone, not even looking up when she walked in. His mother, Shuista Begum, was busy in the kitchen, but she didn't acknowledge Ariba's presence either. Trying not to feel disappointed, she softly said, "I made some cake. It's my birthday today. Maybe we can have tea together." That was all it took for the dam to break. Shuista turned sharply, her eyes hard and lips curled with disgust. "Birthday? You think this is some celebration? You walk around this house like a queen just because you're carrying a child, as if that excuses your laziness, your manipulation." Ariba froze. Danish's father entered the room just in time to add, "You trapped our son. We warned him about you. And now you sit here like you deserve something." Tears welled up in Ariba's eyes. I've done everything you asked. I take care of the house. I didn't even ask for anything this birthday. I just..." "Exactly," Shuista barked. "You didn't ask. You expect. You expect to be treated like you're special. You expect this family to revolve around you and that baby." She looked at Danish then, hoping for a word, a glance, anything. But he didn't speak. He didn't even meet her eyes. Her heart cracked further with each passing second. "Danish," she whispered, but he didn't move. Then, Shuista dropped the final blow. "Pack your things. You have 5 minutes. We're done supporting you. You can go back to wherever you came from." Ariba's hands shook as she turned back toward the stairs, numb with shock. Her legs felt like they could collapse at any moment. She packed what she could into a single suitcase, baby clothes, some cash she had hidden away, a change of clothes, and her medical files. Her heart screamed inside her chest as she quietly pulled out the cake box from the fridge and gently placed it in a grocery bag. Her birthday cake, now just a symbol of something broken. She walked slowly to the front door, the weight of silence pressing down on her. She turned one last time to look at Danish, eyes pleading, searching for the man she had once loved. But he was still seated, still looking away. As she stepped outside, the door slammed shut behind her. Ariba stood on the front sidewalk, clutching her suitcase in one hand and the bag with the cake in the other. Her lips trembled. Tears slid freely down her face. She looked around. No one was there. No one saw her pain. On the day she was born, she had been thrown into the world once again. But this time, unwanted, unloved, and all alone. The late afternoon sky darkened faster than usual as clouds gathered overhead, thick and heavy. Ariba walked aimlessly through the streets, her suitcase wheels catching against cracks in the sidewalk, her other hand protectively cradling her belly. With each step, a dull ache radiated through her lower back. Her feet were swollen, her clothes slightly damp from sweat and anxiety, and her mind was in a fog of disbelief. Just that morning, she had been someone's wife, someone's daughter-in-law, and now she was just no one. A woman thrown out into the world with a baby yet to be born and nowhere to go. She passed shops filled with people chatting, drinking tea, celebrating the day like any other. Couples laughed. Friends sat together under awnings. Ariba kept her head low, feeling their eyes slide toward her. A heavily pregnant woman walking with a suitcase, holding a grocery bag that now carried a slightly squashed birthday cake. They stared but said nothing. Not one offered a word, let alone a hand. Then the rain started, sudden, sharp, and cold. Fat droplets hit her skin, soaking her clothes instantly. Her dupatta clung tightly to her, her camise now heavy and transparent in patches. She tried to duck beneath a tree, but the branches offered little protection. Her suitcase was getting soaked. Her shoes squished with each step. Panic flared in her chest, not for herself, but for the baby. She wrapped her arms tighter around her belly and whispered, "I'm sorry, my baby. I'll find something. I promise." Finally, in the middle of a small park, she spotted a covered bench beneath a rusting metal canopy, probably once meant for resting joggers or people waiting on someone. It was empty. She rushed toward it and sat down slowly, wincing from the pain in her lower back and hips. The rain roared all around her, the world turning into streaks of gray. The park emptied, and she was finally alone. As she sat there, curled up, Ariba's mind drifted to a different time, the beginning. She remembered her first morning after marrying Danish. He had brought her breakfast in bed, toast shaped into little hearts and tea with just the right amount of sugar. He had smiled and said, "You make everything feel like a home." His words had melted her heart. He'd once held her hands under the stars and promised her a world of happiness. "You and I," he'd said, "we're going to raise the kind of family our parents only dreamed of." And she had believed him, with every part of her heart. But slowly, things changed. His affection became mechanical. His parents grew colder. Her smiles were met with sighs. And yet she had stayed. She had tried. And now, here she was, on a bench in the rain, abandoned and forgotten, her birthday cake slowly disintegrating in its damp plastic bag. Her body trembled, more from exhaustion than cold. Hunger gnawed at her stomach, but she didn't move. She couldn't bring herself to beg. Pride kept her lips sealed. Even in this moment of darkness, she held on to the last shred of dignity she had left. An old man passed by and glanced at her. She held his gaze briefly, but he turned his head and kept walking. Night was approaching. The rain had slowed but not stopped. Ariba didn't know how much longer she could sit here. Her whole body felt heavy, not just with the weight of her pregnancy, but the crushing loneliness, the fear, the silence. She whispered quietly to herself, "I just need one night. One place. Just a bed." That's when she saw a small sign across the road, partially hidden behind an overgrown bush. "St. Elora Women's Shelter. All welcome." She blinked hard, unsure if it was real. A flickering light glowed from a small porch, and behind it, a narrow door stood slightly ajar. With what little strength she had left, Ariba stood up, dragging her suitcase behind her, ignoring the way her arms and legs protested. She crossed the street slowly, each step uncertain. When she reached the door, she hesitated for a second, then knocked. The door opened, revealing a tall woman with gentle eyes and silver-streaked hair pulled into a bun. She wore a simple white habit and a soft smile. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, seeing Ariba's soaked clothes and swollen belly. Come in. Come in at once." Ariba didn't speak. She just nodded and stepped inside, the warmth of the shelter wrapping around her like a soft blanket. The woman took her suitcase, set it aside, and helped her into a chair. "I'm Sister Maria," the woman said gently. "You're safe now. We'll take care of you." For the first time that day, Ariba let go. She closed her eyes as tears silently rolled down her cheeks. She was still broken, still scared. But now, for the first time since morning, she wasn't alone. The next morning, the smell of freshly baked bread and boiled tea drifted into Ariba's room, gently waking her. She blinked up at the ceiling, momentarily disoriented, until the events of the previous day came rushing back like a wave: the confrontation, the rain, the park bench, and finally, the shelter. She turned her head slightly and saw a small tray by her bedside, a cup of chai, a slice of toast, and an orange. Her stomach growled. Carefully, she sat up and took a sip of the warm tea, letting it calm her shaking nerves. After breakfast, Sister Maria led her into a small common area where other women sat, some silently knitting, others talking in hushed tones. Ariba kept her gaze low and found an empty seat in the corner. She didn't feel ready to speak. She still hadn't processed how her life had unraveled overnight. A few minutes later, the front door opened, and a man stepped in, carrying 2 bags of groceries. He was tall, sharply dressed in dark slacks and a fitted button-up shirt with sleeves rolled to his elbows. His presence was confident yet unassuming. The other women greeted him with warm familiarity, and Sister Maria's eyes lit up. Ah, Zion. Right on time. He placed the bags on the table and began unpacking: fresh vegetables, cartons of milk, loaves of bread. When his eyes flickered toward Ariba, she instinctively looked away, unsure why she suddenly felt so self-conscious. Later, as the women gathered for lunch in the small dining area, Zion began handing out plates with practiced ease. When he reached Ariba, he offered her a warm smile and placed a plate of rice and lentils in front of her. "You're new here," he said gently. "First day." She nodded, not meeting his eyes. "Yes." He crouched beside her, his voice quiet. "I come here every week. Just helping out. I don't ask questions, and I don't expect answers. But if you need anything at all, just say so." She glanced at him, briefly. There was something calming about his tone, no pity, no judgment. Just genuine concern. She gave a faint nod and muttered, "Thank you." He smiled and moved on. Throughout lunch, she watched him, the way he listened intently when one of the older women spoke, how he helped fix the crooked leg on a dining chair without being asked, how the children in the shelter ran to him with ease. He didn't belong to their world, not really. His polished shoes, his watch, his manner of speech all hinted at wealth and education. But he blended in here with the kind of grace that didn't feel forced. As he prepared to leave, he passed by Ariba again. This time, he handed her a small folded note. "In case you ever need something outside these walls," he said, almost in a whisper. "You don't have to explain anything." She looked down at the note, uncertain. It was a simple card with a name, Zion Rafik, and a number beneath it. No titles, no expectations. Just a quiet offer. She wanted to refuse, to say she'd be fine, that she didn't need help from anyone. But something in her heart, maybe the baby kicking softly beneath her ribs, maybe the ache in her bones, told her to hold on to it. She tucked the note carefully into the zippered pocket of her bag, close to the medical files and the baby clothes she had rescued from her old life. Zion nodded once more and left, the door closing softly behind him. Ariba sat back, her fingers brushing the folded paper in her pocket. She didn't know it yet, but the world she thought had ended was just beginning to open. Slowly, gently, and in the most unexpected way. It was a little after midnight when Ariba woke with a sharp, unfamiliar pain slicing through her lower abdomen. She gasped, her hand instinctively clutching her belly. It wasn't like the dull, persistent aches she'd been feeling for weeks. This was deeper, more intense, rhythmic. She tried to sit up, but another wave hit her, stronger this time, pulling a cry from her lips. The room she was staying in at the shelter was dark and quiet. Rain tapped gently on the windowpane. Ariba reached for the bedside table, searching blindly for the emergency bell Sister Maria had given her. As her fingers finally found it, another contraction gripped her, forcing her to curl into herself. Moments later, the door swung open and Sister Maria rushed in, her eyes wide with concern. "Ariba? What is it?" "I think it's time," Ariba whispered through clenched teeth, sweat already breaking out across her forehead. Within minutes, the shelter came alive. Another volunteer helped Sister Maria get Ariba into the back seat of a small van, covering her with a blanket as she trembled between contractions. The drive to the hospital felt endless. Ariba bit her lip to keep from screaming, holding onto the seatbelt with white knuckles. She was terrified. Not just of the pain, but of the unknown, of doing this without family, without Danish, without anyone but strangers who had shown her more compassion in weeks than her own in-laws had in years. By the time they wheeled her into the emergency room, she was drenched in sweat and shaking. Nurses swarmed around her. An oxygen mask was placed over her face. Monitors beeped. Ariba cried out again, gripping the side of the stretcher, begging silently for it to end. 2 hours later, just as the first golden rays of morning filtered through the hospital blinds, a small cry pierced the air. The sound hit Ariba like a jolt of electricity. They placed the tiny, wriggling baby against her chest, warm, damp, perfect. Ariba looked down, tears spilling freely from her eyes. The baby opened her mouth in a soft yawn, then curled into her mother's chest as if she had always belonged there. Sister Maria stood nearby, smiling with misty eyes. "You did beautifully," she whispered, brushing Ariba's damp hair from her face. "I want to name her Noor," Ariba said softly. "Because she's the only light I've seen in the darkness." The next few hours passed in a haze of exhaustion and quiet joy. The nurses checked on them, and Ariba dozed in and out, cradling Noor in her arms. But by noon, a nurse came in with a furrowed brow and a clipboard in hand. "I'm sorry," she said awkwardly, "but we need to talk about your discharge. There's a balance due for your stay, medication, and delivery." Ariba's heart sank. She hadn't thought that far. The shelter covered small emergencies, but this was different. "I don't have that kind of money," she said quietly, looking down at her sleeping daughter. The nurse nodded sympathetically. "I understand. But hospital policy requires payment before discharge. We can give you time, but—" Sister Maria interrupted. "Let me make a call." She stepped out of the room with her phone. Ariba closed her eyes, holding Noor tightly. The fragile piece she had found was already beginning to crack. Half an hour later, the door opened again, but this time, it wasn't a nurse. It was Zion. He walked in with quiet urgency, holding a small folder and a warm expression. His eyes found Ariba and then Noor, and something in his face softened instantly. "I heard you had quite the night," he said gently, moving closer. I didn't want to bother anyone," Ariba said, flustered and embarrassed. Sister Maria stood behind him, smiling faintly. "You weren't a bother. You needed help." And he didn't hesitate. Zion looked down at Noor, now blinking sleepily in her mother's arms. He reached into his folder, handed the nurse a card, and said, "Whatever the charges are, I'll handle them. No installment plans. Just process the discharge." The nurse nodded, stunned, and quietly left the room. Ariba stared at him, overwhelmed. "Why would you do this for me?" Zion looked at her, then at the tiny baby girl in her arms, his voice soft with reverence. "Because she's already brighter than this whole world," he said. Ariba blinked rapidly as tears filled her eyes. For the first time, those words didn't feel like empty comfort. They felt real, a blessing spoken over her child by someone who saw her not as a burden, but as a miracle. A few days after her discharge from the hospital, Ariba sat in the common room at the shelter, gently rocking Noor in her arms. The baby's tiny fingers curled around her mother's thumb, her breathing soft and rhythmic as she dozed. Around her, life moved on. Other women came and went, children played in the corners, the kitchen hummed with activity, but Ariba felt like she was caught between two worlds. Grateful to be safe, but uncertain of what came next. Zion visited often over the next week. He would bring groceries, drop off baby supplies, diapers, formula, even a small pink stroller. Ariba always thanked him quietly, but her discomfort grew with each visit. She didn't understand why he kept helping. She had nothing to give in return, and the more he gave, the more she feared she would become dependent on kindness that might one day disappear. One morning, as they sat outside the shelter under the soft shade of a neem tree, she finally asked the question that had been burning in her for days. "Why are you really doing all this?" she said softly, not looking at him. "For me. For Noor. You don't even know us." Zion took a moment before answering. He looked down at his clasped hands, then turned his gaze toward the road, where a small group of children played hopscotch with chalk lines drawn on the pavement. "I do it," he said at last, "because once upon a time, someone helped me when I had nothing left." Ariba looked at him then, her expression uncertain. "My wife," he continued, his voice lower now, "died 3 years ago. Cancer. She was everything to me. We didn't have children, just plans. And then one day, all of it vanished. I lost her, and with her, my sense of direction. I had money, businesses, homes, but nothing made sense anymore. I'm sorry, Ariba whispered. He nodded slowly. After she passed, I tried to bury myself in work, but it only made the emptiness worse. Then I came here. Volunteering wasn't part of some plan. I just walked into the shelter one day with groceries and never stopped coming. Somehow, helping others helped me breathe again. Ariba absorbed his words in silence. She hadn't expected this from him, not the pain, not the vulnerability. I'm not a saint, Ariba, he added gently. I run real estate projects, commercial plazas, rental homes. I've done well. But none of that means anything when someone you love disappears from your life. Since then, I've chosen to give where I can. And helping you, it's not charity. She looked away, guilt swimming in her eyes. But I don't want to feel like someone you're fixing. You're not, he said firmly. This isn't pity. You've been through enough already. This is about dignity. You deserve to live, to rest, to raise your daughter in peace. I'm offering you a room in one of my empty ghost houses. Fully furnished, safe, peaceful. No rent. No strings. Just time to rebuild. But why me? She whispered. Zion leaned forward slightly. Because you're not just surviving, Ariba. You're holding yourself together with grace even after being broken. And that kind of strength, it deserves a foundation to stand on. Ariba stared at him for a long moment, the wind gently lifting strands of her hair. For the first time in what felt like forever, someone had offered her a home, not as a favor, not with conditions, but as a fellow human who understood what it meant to lose everything. She didn't answer right away, but in her heart, something shifted. A door opened. Not to luxury, but to safety. And that, she realized, was all she had ever truly wanted. The day Ariba stepped into the guesthouse with Noor in her arms, it felt like she had walked into a different life. The house was tucked behind a quiet lane, surrounded by flowering bushes and shaded by tall trees. The air smelled faintly of jasmine and earth. Inside, sunlight poured through wide windows, casting golden patterns across wooden floors and creamy white walls. The living room was lined with shelves full of books, most of them well-read, their spines worn with love. A few green potted plants rested in corners, breathing quiet life into the space. Ariba paused at the threshold, overwhelmed by the warmth and calm that radiated from every corner. Noor stirred in her arms, yawning, as if sensing they were finally home. Zion had kept his word. The house was fully furnished but modest. Soft linen curtains, a small kitchen with spotless countertops, a bedroom with a crib already set up next to a simple bed. In the living room, a small note rested on the coffee table. Your sanctuary. No expectations. Just peace. Zion. Ariba's hands trembled slightly as she set the note down. She placed Noor in the crib and took a long, deep breath. For the first time in weeks, she didn't feel watched, judged, or afraid. She could finally exhale. Over the next few days, life began to settle into a quiet rhythm. Ariba cooked simple meals in the small kitchen, often listening to soft instrumental music as she rocked Noor to sleep. The baby responded to the change too. She slept longer, cried less, smiled more. It was as if the peace of the house had seeped into both of them. Zion visited often, but never without calling first. He brought groceries, tiny clothes for Noor, baby lotion, new storybooks. Sometimes he'd drop by with soup he claimed he didn't cook but somehow always tasted homemade. He never stayed long, never lingered. He would check if they were okay, make sure she didn't need anything, and quietly leave. His respect for her space was constant and unwavering. But more than his gestures, it was his presence that began to chip away at the walls Ariba had built around herself. He never looked at her with pity, only quiet encouragement. He never pried into her past or asked about Danish. He simply showed up, steady, reliable, kind. It was during one of his short visits, as he watched Noor babble to herself on a colorful play mat, that he asked gently, Have you thought about what's next for you? Ariba hesitated. I don't know, she admitted. I haven't had the time or strength to think ahead. You don't have to rush, he said, but when you're ready, the world's still there. Waiting. That night, Ariba searched online for courses. She had left her degree unfinished after marriage, a diploma in early childhood education. With a little research and a few hesitant clicks, she enrolled in 2 online classes. It wasn't much, but it was a beginning. When she told Zion, his smile lit up his whole face. You're not just surviving now, he told her, gently bouncing Noor in his arms. You're rebuilding. Ariba felt the words settle inside her like light through a stained glass window, soft, colorful, warm. She was no longer just a woman who had been abandoned. She was a mother, a student, a woman finding her footing again. Each day in the guesthouse, each line she read in her textbooks, each tiny giggle from Noor, they all reminded her that healing didn't always come with fanfare. Sometimes it came in the quiet, in the sunlight, in the stillness of a new beginning. It had been nearly 4 months since Ariba had moved into the guesthouse, and in that time, her world had slowly begun to blossom again. Noor was growing fast, her eyes alert, her laughter infectious, her tiny hands always reaching for new things. Ariba spent her mornings attending virtual classes and her afternoons taking long walks in the small garden, Noor nestled against her chest in a baby wrap. The quiet routine gave her strength she never knew she had. One breezy afternoon, as she was preparing lunch, there was a knock at the door, firm, persistent. She wasn't expecting Zion, he always texted first. Wiping her hands on a kitchen towel, she opened the door, only to freeze in place. Standing in front of her were the 3 people she had tried so hard to forget: Danish, his mother Shaista Begum, and his father. They looked nothing like the arrogant, dismissive people who had thrown her out. Danish's face was pale, thinner than she remembered, dark circles under his eyes. His parents looked older, somehow smaller, like pride had been drained from their bodies. Ariba's grip tightened on the doorframe. Noor let out a small sound from her playpen behind her, and Ariba instinctively looked back, reassured by the sight of her daughter sitting safely in the sunlit living room. Danish cleared his throat, his voice low and strained. Can we talk? Ariba said nothing but stepped back slightly, allowing them in only as far as the small entrance corridor. They stepped inside, eyes scanning the space, clearly surprised by how well she was living. Shaista looked around as if searching for proof. This place, it's nice, she muttered, almost begrudgingly. I heard you're doing well, Danish said, trying to keep his tone casual. And Noor. She's healthy, right? Ariba folded her arms. Why are you here? Danish shifted, clearly uncomfortable. Look, things haven't gone well. My business. The investors pulled out. And Alina, she left. Took her car, her money, everything. His father jumped in. It was all a misunderstanding, Ariba. We were angry. We didn't think clearly. You didn't think at all, Ariba replied calmly. Shaista's eyes brimmed with fake tears. We're sorry, Beta. You're our daughter. Come home. We miss you. Ariba looked at them, long and hard. Their words rang hollow, not out of guilt, but desperation. She saw through the polished apologies, the carefully practiced sorrow. This wasn't repentance. It was convenience. They had lost everything, and now they needed her back to rebuild their image, to soften their downfall, to patch the cracks they had made themselves. Danish stepped forward slightly. Please. I need you, Ariba. Just help me fix things. For appearances. We'll make it work this time. She stared at him in stunned silence for a moment. Then she laughed, not out of amusement, but disbelief. You threw me out, she said, her voice steady but cold. With your child inside me. On my birthday. Like I was trash. I begged you to say something. Anything. And you chose silence. He opened his mouth, but she raised her hand. No, she said. You don't get to rewrite the story now. You see a stable home, a happy child, and you think I can fix your broken life. But Noor and we've already been reborn. Shuista reached forward, tears sliding down her face now. We were wrong. We didn't know. Ariba took a step back and shook her head slowly. You don't get to come back just because life humbled you. Noor doesn't need a grandfather who once called her a burden. And I don't need a husband who watched me be humiliated and said nothing. With that, she walked to the door, opened it wide, and looked them each in the eye. This chapter is closed. She shut the door before any of them could reply, locking it with a quiet, final click. Inside, Noor cooed and reached for her. Ariba walked over, picked her up, and held her close, heart pounding, not with pain, but with the solid, unshakable weight of knowing she had finally chosen herself. The days passed gently, each one folding into the next like a soft page in a well-worn book. Ariba's life had settled into a rhythm that felt almost too peaceful to be real. Noor was thriving, her laughter echoing through the quiet rooms of the guesthouse. Ariba, too, felt stronger, more grounded. She had nearly completed her first 2 online courses, her confidence slowly rebuilding, like a house repaired brick by brick. Zion continued to visit, always thoughtful, always measured. He brought new books for Ariba when he noticed she'd finished the ones on her shelf. He sat with Noor and read her stories, his deep voice calming the child instantly. He never imposed, never stayed too long, but he was constant, like the evening breeze that slipped in through the window every day at sunset. But lately, something had changed. There were moments when Ariba would catch Zion looking at her a second too long. When their hands brushed while passing a bottle or a book, he would pull away a little too quickly. His words, though kind, sometimes carried a hesitation, as though he was editing himself mid-sentence. She noticed it, felt it, though neither of them dared speak of it. Then one evening, after Noor had finally drifted to sleep, Zion arrived with dinner. Dal, rice, and soft flatbread wrapped in cloth. They sat at the small dining table, the lamplight casting a soft glow over their quiet meal. There was a stillness between them that Ariba hadn't felt before. Not awkward, but heavy with unspoken words. Zion finally broke the silence. Do you ever think about what comes after all this? She looked up at him, confused. After what? After survival, he said. After healing. What happens next, for you? Ariba paused, considering. I think I'm still figuring that out. I'm not rushing toward anything. I just want Noor to grow up safe. I want to finish my education. Stand on my own feet. He nodded slowly, then looked away for a moment, as if debating something with himself. When he turned back, his voice was softer. Helping you, being part of your life, Ariba, it gave me something I didn't know I was missing. After my wife died, I stopped feeling anything deeply. I moved like a shadow through my own life. But then you came into it with all this quiet strength. You didn't ask for anything, didn't expect anything. And watching you rise after everything, it made me feel alive again. Ariba blinked, stunned. Her fingers stilled on the edge of her plate. She hadn't expected this. Not from him. Not now. Zion, she started, but he raised a hand gently. I'm not asking for anything, he said quickly. I just needed to say it. Because it's real for me. But I know where you are. I know you're still healing. I'd never want to put pressure on you or make you feel like you owe me something. You don't. She looked at him then, really looked, and saw the vulnerability behind his calm eyes. A man who had lost love, then rediscovered something that gave him hope again. And he had chosen to share that with her, even knowing the timing might not be right. Ariba took a slow breath. I'm not ready, she said gently. My heart's still learning how to beat on its own again. But what you've done for me, for Noor, I'll never forget it. And I don't want you to step away either. I want you here. Just as you are. Zion nodded, a quiet smile forming. Then I'll wait. No expectations. Just time. They didn't speak much after that. But the silence between them was no longer heavy. It was full of possibility, like seeds waiting beneath the soil. There was no rush. No promises. Just two people, scarred but strong, letting something new take root. Months had passed since that quiet evening when unspoken feelings had finally been voiced. In that time, Ariba had flourished. Her days were filled with purpose, juggling motherhood, finishing her online certifications, and slowly building the foundation of something she could call her own. She'd launched a modest online business selling handmade baby essentials, swaddle wraps, bibs, soft knitted toys, all crafted during her late nights after Noor had fallen asleep. Orders were small at first, but word spread, and soon, customers began leaving glowing reviews. Each sale felt like a small triumph. Each package she mailed was a reminder that she was no longer just surviving. She was creating something beautiful out of the ashes of what she'd once lost. And now, it was her birthday. She didn't expect much. A simple meal, a quiet evening with Noor, that was more than enough. Birthdays had once held painful memories, especially the one that had changed her life forever. But this year, as she stood before her mirror in a soft blue dress, her heart felt unexpectedly light. Noor sat on the bed behind her, clapping as if sensing something special was coming. Right on time, Zion arrived. He was holding a bouquet of white lilies, her favorite, as he had somehow remembered. Noor ran to him, babbling and excited, her little arms raised. He scooped her up with ease, kissing her cheek before greeting Ariba with a warm, respectful smile. "Ready for lunch?" he asked. She nodded, grabbing her bag. "You didn't have to do all this." "I wanted to," he said simply. "It's your day." As they drove, Ariba tried to guess where he might be taking her. A small seaside cafe, maybe. But when he turned down a quiet road lined with tall pine trees and wildflowers, her curiosity deepened. The path opened to reveal a stretch of coastline, and perched atop a gentle hill was a breathtaking white mansion that looked like something out of a dream. Elegant archways, sprawling balconies, and windows that seemed to invite the ocean breeze inside. Zion slowed the car and parked in the circular driveway. Ariba blinked, confused. Whose place is this? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stepped out, walked around to her door, and opened it with a quiet smile. Noor was already in his arms. "I have something to show you," he said. They walked toward the large wooden doors, Ariba looking around in awe. Everything was perfect, the lush gardens, the intricate tilework, the scent of the sea in the air. Zion reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small golden key. He held it out to her. "It's yours." Ariba let out a short, surprised laugh. "Very funny." But Zion didn't smile this time. He reached into his other pocket and handed her a folded document, the official deed. Her name was on it. Her eyes scanned it again and again, disbelief and shock tightening in her throat. "This can't be real," she whispered. "Why would you?" Zion looked at her gently. "Because you've built yourself back up from nothing. Because you never let cruelty define you. And because every queen deserves her own castle. This is not charity. This is recognition. You've earned this, Ariba." Her eyes welled up. The tears fell, but for the first time in years, they weren't from pain or betrayal. They came from something far deeper: gratitude, hope. The quiet, overwhelming realization that she was loved and valued beyond measure. She clutched the golden key, her hands trembling. Noor giggled in Zion's arms, reaching out to touch her mother's tear-streaked face. "I don't even know what to say," Ariba whispered. "You don't have to," Zion said, his voice warm. "Welcome home." And in that moment, standing in front of her new home by the sea, Ariba finally believed that life could still hold magic. Not fairy tales, but something far better. A future built not on fantasy, but on healing, resilience, and love that had grown slowly, deeply, and truly. 1 year later, the air was filled with laughter, soft music, and the scent of vanilla cake. Noor, now toddling around in a frilly white dress with tiny gold shoes, giggled as she chased a balloon across the living room floor. Ariba watched her with a tender smile, her heart swelling with joy that often still felt unreal. From that dark day of abandonment to this moment of light, she had journeyed a long, unforgiving road. The mansion was no longer just a gift, it was a home, filled with warmth, memories, and moments of healing. Every corner reflected her spirit. Calming earth tones, cozy reading nooks, walls lined with photos of Noor's milestones and her growing business ventures. Ariba Designs, her online brand of handmade baby products and mother's essentials, had now turned into a full-fledged e-commerce store with international orders. She had hired 2 other women from the same shelter she once lived in, giving them a new start, just like Zion had once given her. Zion remained a quiet, constant force in their lives. He never pushed, never asked for more than she could give. He had built a bond with Noor that mirrored fatherhood in its purest form. And though their relationship remained undefined in title, it was deeply rooted in love, trust, and shared respect. Their dinners together had become a ritual. Their conversations spanned dreams, fears, and quiet laughter. Slowly, imperceptibly, something beautiful had blossomed between them, something stronger than infatuation. Something lasting. That afternoon, Ariba stood backstage at a women's empowerment conference held in the city's largest auditorium. She wore a soft mauve suit she had tailored herself, with Noor's tiny handprint stitched into the inside lining, her silent reminder of why she stood tall now. Zion stood at the back of the audience, holding Noor in his arms. The little girl clapped at the stage lights, unaware that her mother was about to make hundreds of women cry and feel seen. When Ariba walked on stage, applause greeted her, but she didn't smile until she saw Noor waving from Zion's arms. That small hand wave steadied her nerves. She began, "Exactly 2 years ago, on my birthday, I was thrown out of my home. 8 months pregnant. Alone. Shamed. Forgotten." A hushed silence swept through the hall. I begged for mercy. None came. But sometimes, being thrown out is life's way of throwing you forward. Murmurs of agreement rose. I found shelter in a place built for the broken, and found strength in the people who refused to see me as weak. I met someone who showed me that kindness doesn't need repayment. That dignity isn't a luxury, it's a right. She paused, emotion rising. They threw me out with nothing, but life gave me everything. Love, peace, my own business, and yes, my own mansion. The crowd burst into applause. I tell you this not for pity, but for power. Because every woman here has a story. And every story has a turning point. If you're standing in darkness, trust me, light is still possible. It may not come from where you expect, but it comes. She stepped back, eyes gleaming. The applause was thunderous. Women rose to their feet, some wiping tears. Zion stood quietly in the back, his eyes never leaving her. Noor clapped with wide-eyed excitement, not understanding the gravity of the moment, only that her mama was shining. Later that evening, as the 3 of them walked along the sea wall near their home, Ariba held Noor's hand while Zion gently carried her shoes. She looked at him, the ocean breeze lifting her scarf slightly. "You've been more than I ever thought I deserved," she said softly. He smiled. "You've always deserved everything. The world just took too long to agree." And as Noor squealed, chasing the tide, Ariba leaned her head on Zion's shoulder, her heart full, her soul at peace. This wasn't the ending of her story, it was the beginning of a new kind of love. One born not of fairy tales, but of fire, rebuilding, and the courage to open her heart again.